Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I'm Luis from Shadow Network, which is a MEV protection mechanism using threshold encryption. But this talk will be a little more broader and sort of connecting what we're working on kind of in practice, but connecting this to the broader overarching sort of why are we doing this, and why a little bit of what I think is going wrong and how can we maybe address it, and how does it connect to other things. So a little bit broad, but I'll also connect it to the more concrete things as well. So yeah, I think this is kind of the overarching term I kind of I stole from actually the traditional finance world, where they, after the 2008 financial crisis, they had these problems with they would say the market architecture is unsustainable, and Ponzi's and all these real estate derivatives things, and they said we need to change something. We need to sort of create a better architecture, right, and have policy and things that improve it. And I stole this sort of term and said maybe we need something similar for crypto, right? Why am I saying this? I think sort of from the outside, the mainstream regulators are looking at crypto and they are fundamentally perceiving it as unsustainable. And this is a bunch of different things. So from the outside, people are saying it's all Ponzi's, it's unsustainable, sort of self-referential revenue models. I would say sort of regulation. So some people would say there's not enough regulation. Maybe some other people would say there's too much regulation, but clearly this is sort of like out of sync. And then for our specific sort of what we are working on, we also think that the transaction supply chain is in a pretty bad state. Briefly on this, right, because this is what we're working on, is front-running and malicious MEV causes immense user losses. More importantly, we think it deters mainstream and serious investors from even entering crypto. And in the way we're dealing with the way we're trying to fix it, indirectly creates these centralization and censorship vectors in the transaction and MEV supply chain. One example of this is something that Martin from Gnosis is saying, and some other people, I think SMG also like displayed this a little bit, that it's actually now cheaper to censor on Ethereum with PBS than it was before. So we are fixing some problems with the way we're dealing with MEV currently, but we're also sort of creating these longer-term dangers or these censorship vectors. And yeah, again, connecting it to the bigger picture, by having this hostile sort of transaction supply chain environment, how it is right now, I think we're also just lowering accessibility, and we're sort of favoring those very sophisticated trader type of people who can still make money, but everyone else is sort of like left out, right? So it's an accessibility issue as well. Sure you guys, everyone should be familiar, generally speaking, or just reminding you, so front running, what is front running and how does it relate to malicious MEV? Front running is basically just jumping the queue. So there's a queue in front of the exchange, essentially. People are lining up to place orders. And front running means you're somehow sort of jumping the queue and stealing someone else's order, essentially. In the real world, at least a certain subset of this is illegal. So especially the ones that are sort of relating to insider information, that's illegal, actually. In crypto, usually people are definitely considering as being pretty harmful. Yeah, sort of, there is also non-malicious MEV. So it's a subset of MEV, and there's which is malicious, and the other subset of it, so the generalized arbitrage and liquidations are usually considered to not be harmful. And what's the overall impact of this? We think is sort of, again, I think it's in the beginning, so mainstream regulators are really fed up with crypto. Like every time I'm listening to sort of tech podcasts, non-crypto tech podcasts, people are laughing about it. And then if you hear regulators talk about crypto, they are also not very looking not very favorable upon it. They think it's hostile. Again, sort of it's inaccessible in its current state to most, and because of this, I think we're missing out on a lot of business. Right? If we can improve accessibility and sustainability of it, I think we could actually draw a lot more mainstream users to it. Yeah? So this is what I'm saying. Like we could, like one idea could be rally around this sort of new paradigm of sustainable market architecture, which is a very broad term, trying to like split it up and say what could be some of these principles. And my 5 principles that I came up with for now would be base layer neutrality, accessibility, sustainable revenue models, sensible regulation, and privacy. So I think if we improve these, I think we can have a better outcome. I'm sorry for the sort of satanistic pentagram, but what I'm trying to say here is that it's sort of all related, right? So for example, the accessibility I think is connected to base layer neutrality. The more neutral a base layer is, the more equally accessible it is for everyone, right? And then also I think privacy is pretty related to regulation because there's a natural sort of fight between these two. Yeah? And this is actually what I want to zoom in on, these 2 pairs of sub-issues. So first on sort of sensible regulation and privacy. And just want to zoom in on these 2 issues. Again, I think they're related, or they are kind of in a conflict with each other. And I just want to zoom in into something that can help, right? Which, I'm sure you're all familiar with this, is this cool idea from Amin, and also now Amin and Vitalik wrote a paper about it, which is this idea of essentially a compliant version of Tornado in a way, which is it's a ZK scheme which you can use just like Tornado for on-chain privacy, but you can, more importantly, you can actually allow users to associate or disassociate with a certain subset of other depositors. So you can actually prove in a way that you are not commingling your funds with a terrorist or someone on the OFAC list. Right? And I think this is just one really good example of where we can build more sustainable market architecture, and in this case, combining privacy and regulation. And again, I think privacy is often, I think, underappreciated because not only is it like I think it's kind of like a human right, but it also is really sort of, I think, has a lot of value if you think about this world where information is money. Elon Musk says information equals money. If there's no privacy, then information can't really be money because then everyone has access to it, right? So privacy is deeply connected to information equals money, and it's deeply connected to actually value and business value. Yeah. So there's one example, right? And then zooming in on the other example, which is sort of what we're working on at Shutter, is this duality between base layer neutrality and accessibility. And the thing that we are doing is we're encrypting the mempool to increase base layer neutrality. And again, we also think it connects to accessibility because having a more neutral playing field in terms of mempool accessibility, we think improves sort of mempool accessibility. Yeah? So the way we're doing it, we have this encryption and decryption scheme, a decentralized encryption-decryption scheme, which encrypts transactions and have them be signed by the block producer or the sequencer or the validator wherever we implement it without them knowing what's even in the transactions. So they and no one else can't censor or front run based on the content of the transactions. So so pretty simple on the surface sort of, and then we need this more complex sort of threshold encryption scheme and this decentralized keeper network to make it safe, to enforce the reveal of the transaction and also to decentralize this encryptor and decryptor role. Because if you had a centralized encryptor or decryptor, then again you would you wouldn't solve the problem at this level, right? And it's this scheme which built as this encryption-decryption scheme, and it can be plugged into other infrastructures, for example, L2s or sidechains. And if you do so, if you kind of enhance this protocol, a protocol, with this type of encrypted mempool, we think the benefits for users are, because it essentially then results in a quasi-random ordering with, that still includes arbitrage, so we can prevent front-running, still have sort of the majority of the arbitrage and liquidations. And we think this is the best outcome to, or the best situation leading to sort of the highest kind of amount of information symmetry and that allows safer trading, right? You're not getting front run. In the consequence of this, also more profitable trading because your prices are better. And we're adding this sort of real-time censorship resistance because, yeah, if you don't see what it's in the transactions, you can't censor based on the contents. Yeah, and overall, just a more neutral base layer. Yeah, what it was the original goal of it. Yeah? Even for the intermediaries that are running this, or that are sort of in charge of ordering transactions, even for them, we think it's actually a benefit. So initially, you would think if you're restricting the, if you're taking away the ability for them to censor a front run, if you're sort of taking away a little bit from their MEV income stream, initially people would maybe say, well, this is actually bad for me if I'm the transaction ordering entity, sort of. However, we think there's actually going to be a bunch of upsides as well. So you can still collect and distribute the back-running related MEV. So you're just not going to be front-running, but you're actually still retaining the ability to extract this other type of MEV. And we think sort of by having a better, more fair, more neutral base layer, I think it's going to be an increase. You're increasing the attractiveness of the whole protocol and all the apps on top. Overall, we think it could actually even like increase your income, especially in terms of transaction fees, but even maybe also in the other type, the back-running related MEV. Yeah, because you're actually then, because right now it's really unsustainable, you can't really trade on it. If you're actually making it like viable for normal people to trade, it could actually even increase your revenue streams. Then there's this a little more complicated argument around, do you actually, as a sort of regulator, or as someone who's operating, let's say, in the West somewhere where they are under sort of regulatory scrutiny, do you actually want to have this outside power to censor or front run or meddle with the transactions, or not? Yeah, because the regulator is looking at this and they're looking at your ability. What can you actually influence? What's your power over this network? And if you're just a neutral technical provider, then it should be fine. But the more it looks like you're actually sort of extracting financial value from front-running your users, the less favorable is the regulator going to look upon you and might actually want to regulate you as a type of more like a financial intermediary, like a bank or like an MTF. And we're seeing the regulators actually moving in this direction. We're seeing them making these comments about, or not just comments, actually like draft regulation about banning front-running or even certain, so NIMICA regulation and some other bank for international settlements as well made these statements in this direction that will also maybe ban front-running in crypto, just like they are banning it in the traditional finance world. The concrete sort of, our most advanced implementation of this is together with the Gnosis chain. And this is sort of this collaborative effort where we're on the path of implementing it into the Gnosis chain. We call it shutterized beacon chain. Could also be this sort of model for even the ETH L1. And we have this kind of practical roadmap towards it where we build it as an opt-in version initially, and then again, can serve as a reference implementation for other L1s or L2s. This is how it looks like. I won't really go into sort of too many technical details, but this is the high-level architecture. There's sort of the sequencer contract transactions are going in the sequencer contract while they're still encrypted, and this defines them as being final, and defines them as being in this order, and sort of that the proposer has to actually then accept this, no matter what's in the transactions, and only then do the keepers release the decryption key, which then executes transactions, and again, ensures the properties that we talked about before. Briefly, why are we using this threshold encryption approach and maybe not something like some other approach? So we think, briefly speaking, threshold encryption is really the best compromise between decentralization, security, and technical feasibility. So you can use a sort of hardware-based approach, like trusted execution environments like SGX, or you could in the future maybe use these super advanced technologies like polymorphic encryption or more advanced forms of MPC. But We think the hardware trust assumption, the one case, make it unviable, and we think the level of technological breakthroughs we would actually need to make FHE practical and cost-effective. We think again, make it that's not really viable right now. Yeah? So to conclude, I think this is just an idea to say, to help kind of the crypto space by saying we should actually maybe rally around and start a discussion around what should we change and to make the market architecture more sustainable. Again, similarly to how they did it or how they thought about it after the financial crisis in '08. I think it's going to be important to not just have this be a broad. This word sustainability is very broad and non-descriptive word, so I think it's going to be important to draw the connection between the bigger words and the more concrete implementations. And all this I think is quite boring, right? It's just like the architecture part and this sustainability. It sounds all boring, and I think it is boring in a way. So I think the next step would be then to build interesting products on top. But yeah, again, I think it's actually good to have a boring architecture, a boring infrastructure, because you don't want to have excitement and problems on that level, right? So yeah, and then other sort of action item would be if you are building a sidechain or L2 or a front-running sort of prone dApp, anything with DeFi, right? Would love to get in touch and hear your sort of demands or your requirements for this. Or yeah, again, L2 or building an L2 or sidechain would be awesome to talk, and whether the encrypted mempool could be in addition a differentiator as well for that protocol. And yeah, follow us on Twitter, and yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lewis. That was very insightful.